Hi, I'm Gregg LeFevre, and this is the Compulsive Storyteller, a series of short personal stories where we explore the idea that truth can be stranger than fiction. This week's episode is entitled Spiked Collars. When I take my dog Tia to Tompkins Square Park in the East Village, most of the benches are shaded by the old tall trees of the park, but there's one bench that's always in the sun, which is my favorite. Today, however, there's someone else sitting on my bench, and he's a strange one. I let my dog off leash, approach the bench cautiously, and ask, "Do you mind if I join you?" He looks me up and down and grunts a bit as he gives one upward thrust with his chin, which I take to be a yes. He has a big, thick, fat-headed black pit bull curled up asleep at his feet. They both wore identical spiked collars. I'd say the silver spikes on the black leather are an inch long and lost most of their luster years ago. His head is shaved, his arms and neck are heavily tattooed with all sorts of images: skulls, wings, stitches, and a likeness of his dog. He wears an old leather jacket, torn jeans, worn-out motorcycle boots, and everything is speckled with dots and dribbles of different colored paints. "So I'm guessing you're an artist?" I ask.
"Yeah,"
is all he has to say. He's a man of few words. I respond, "I'm an artist too." He could care less. Then we both turn our faces toward the sun and relax. While I enjoy the warm sun on my face, I can't help but think about my benchmate and take a sideways glance at him while his eyes are closed. I had noticed some remarkably deep, straight scar lines crisscrossing his face when I first sat down. He opens his eyes and catches me looking.
"You wondering about my scars?"
he says in a raspy voice. I hesitate because I've been caught, and I don't know what to say. "Well, they certainly give you character." He snorts at that, then he actually starts to talk. Gesturing to the one across his forehead, which interrupts one of his eyebrows, he begins,
"This one I got in an unprovoked knife attack in Chicago."
Then he points to the one that cuts down across one cheek and grazes his lip.
"This one I got in an unprovoked knife attack in Brooklyn. And the last one,"
which comes up from under his jacket and cuts diagonally across the other cheek,
"I got just down the block from here."
"Wow," I say, while the Twilight Zone theme begins to sound in my head. At that moment, Tia shows up, and I'm a little nervous that his pit might wake up and feel protective. "Is your dog okay with my dog coming up like this?"
"No problem. Thug wouldn't dare try anything."
Of course his pit is named Thug. This guy has to be from Central Casting or an asylum. Or maybe he walked out of a book by Robert Louis Stevenson or Jack London. I'm feeling a little more relaxed now, so I ask him what kind of art he does.
"Flowers."
Now I'm surprised, figuring he paints sloppy graffiti or works like Basquiat. "Do you paint on canvas?"
"Nah, on the sidewalks. You probably know my work. I do those poured paint line drawings of daisies. They're all over the place down here."
"Yeah, of course I know them. Those are yours? Damn, you're certainly very prolific." Now I'm smiling because his art is such a contradiction. Those sweet and delicate flowers are painted by this scar-faced punk. Unbelievable. As I muse about this, it occurs to me that he would make a great subject for a short film, and I have just the guy to make it with. Turning back to him, I ask, "What would you think of the idea of me making a short documentary film about you?" He pauses before his deadpan response,
"Why not?"
"We could film you painting on the sidewalks, then maybe a scene in your studio, and maybe one here in the park, talking about your life." He pensively moves his chin up and down in a yes. "Can I get your number?" He digs into his pocket and comes up with a new wrapped Band-Aid, rips it in half, borrows my pen, and writes down his number. "Okay then." I reach out my hand, and he gives me a very strong shake. Not a bone crusher, but close. "Well, it's been great to meet you, and I'll talk to my filmmaker friend and give you a call and we can set up a time to start shooting. As I put Tia on her leash and head out of the park, I realized that he never smiled. Not even once. Not a smirk, no grin, no sign of mirth, nothing. Tompkins Square Park is in the East Village, not far from Washington Square Park, which is in the West Village. I live in the West Village, and during the years that I've lived in the neighborhood, Washington Square Park has gone through a profound transformation. After the renovation of the plaza and fountain at the core of the park, its soul has changed. Everything about the park feels different. Check out my episode number 64, Street Comedian, for a taste of the park in the early days. Once a bastion of protests and large gatherings, like the draft card burnings in the 1960s, it has become a safe haven for NYU students to hang out, along with the upper-middle-class denizens of the newly gentrified surrounding village, both gay and straight. Even the dog run has changed. Instead of one big pen, there are now two nicely landscaped runs, one for big dogs and one for small. The whole place seems too precious for my taste, and Tia feels the same way. That's why we walked the extra mile to Tompkins Square Park, which has not been renovated, and has a much funkier mix of people, in part because it's in a more working-class neighborhood. Even the dog run has a wilder feel, with many more mutts and pit bulls charging around, while in Washington Square, dogs all seem purebred. Tompkins Square's more recent history confirms its edgier character. In the 1980s, groups of drug pushers, homeless people, and young squatters and punks had largely taken over the park. The surrounding community was divided about what, if anything, should be done about it. The Parks Department adopted a 1 a.m. curfew for the previously 24-hour park that never closed, in an attempt to bring it under control. On July 31, 1988, a protest rally against the curfew saw several clashes between the police and protesters. Another rally was held on August 6th, when the police charged the protesters and a riot ensued. Bystanders, activists, police officers, neighborhood residents, and journalists were caught up in the violence, which continued until the next day, when the mayor rescinded the curfew. The neighborhood, previously divided over how to handle the park, was now unanimous in its condemnation of the heavy-handed police tactics. A New York Times editorial entitled, "Yes, a Police Riot," confirmed what ubiquitous media coverage made clear. The NYPD was responsible for inciting a riot. This was the context behind my first meeting with Spike. The following week, I get together with my filmmaker friend Kevin at the Horseshoe Bar by the corner of the park. Having just finished the film, he's starting to look around for his next project. I pitch him the Spiked Collar story, and he's on board immediately. At the bar, we have a kickoff conversation about money and equipment and scheduling. It's agreed that we will split the cost of the camera and equipment rental. We share equally all the running around and grunt work. Lastly, we both get credited as co-producers, and then I'll be the director, and he will be the director of photography, and we will both edit the film. But before we move forward on anything, Kevin wants to meet Spike. I've had a couple of phone conversations with our prospective leading man, but I'm nervous about the meeting. After all, Spike's a tough character and a man of few words. I want Kevin not so much to like him, but to want to work with him. When we all meet up at the Horseshoe Bar, Spike is withdrawn and furtive at first. But he knows how to pound down those cheap shots, and once loosened up, he and Kevin get along fine. At the end of our meetup, we all raise our glasses in a final toast to the project, and I share my hope that the Lucky Horseshoe sign above the bar will bring good luck to our film. Cheers! The equipment is rented, the storyboards are stacked, Spike signs a contract and a release outlining that the three of us will share equally in any profits. A couple of nights before we're ready to start, I go to the opening of an art exhibition of a female artist I know. The place is crowded with women from all over the East and West villages, and I fall into conversation with two women, telling them about my film project. When I describe Spike's delicate and sweet poured paint daisies, one of the women loudly objects, "What?" and informs me that everybody knows that they're painted by a local artist named Elizabeth. Here, let me find her. She's around here somewhere. When Elizabeth comes over, she's a little put off that I don't know her work, and I respond, No, I know and like your sidewalk paintings. It's just that I was told they were painted by a guy who lives in the East Village. No surprise, she responds. This is New York after all, where so many artists, particularly female artists, get ripped off all the time. When I share the news with Kevin that Spike is a con man, we're both crestfallen, but decide to go ahead with the project anyway, and then we can have a surprise ending when we confront him with the fact that he's a total bullshit artist. We also decide to have some backup handy, a couple of big bouncer friends, so when we confront him, we don't end up with some facial scars of our own. I call Spike to confirm filming the next morning at 8, and there's no answer. I try multiple times, and still no answer. It occurs to me that whenever we've talked, I've called him, and there's always been a lot of street noise, so maybe I was dialing a payphone, and I have no idea where he lives. The thing that neither Kevin nor I can figure out is why Spike disappeared when he did. Why now, after all the prep? Did he just want to mess with us and screw over some West Village types? Weeks later, after my disappointment with the whole fiasco has faded, I see Spike on a shady bench in Tompkins Square Park. When he sees me coming, he rises abruptly and wakes up Thug with a kick. The dog stands rigid, pulling against his chain, growling, and I stop dead in my tracks. He says, "Get the fuck away from me, man." "But why did you fuck me over and then ghost on me?" I said, "Get the fuck away from me, man." There's no telling what his next move might be, so I retreat. As I walk away, I think to myself, yes, this is New York City after all. Are you ready to tell your own story on The Compulsive Storyteller? We're launching a new segment of guest storytelling, and we want to hear your stories. Email a voice recording to hello@thecompulsivestoryteller.com. I'll play selected stories on upcoming episodes. Try to be as clear as possible in your recording, and we reserve the right to lightly edit them for length and clarity. Leave your name or contact information in your voicemail or email, and let us know if you'd like the story to be anonymous. I can't wait to hear from you. The Compulsive Storyteller is now co-produced by Gregg LeFevre and Fadia Montserrat, who's also arranged the music and created the special effects. Emily Ramone does design, research, editing, and marketing. Peter Kokoma has made our theme music and for many seasons co-produced the show with me. If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Compulsive Storyteller, and we'd love to hear from you. This podcast is independently produced, so we really appreciate all your help and support. Share the show with your friends, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and please leave a review. You can also check out our website, thecompulsivestoryteller.com, for more information. Thanks for listening, and if you didn't like this one, the next one will be another story. All characters and events portrayed in this podcast are based on my truth, with some names and facts changed for privacy. The conversations and dialogues are based on my best memory, but are not word-for-word recreations.